So Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. This next interview, powered by Square. If you run a restaurant, you're too busy for this ad. You're thinking about how to get more orders flowing and new locations opening. You need to get more customers, keep them coming back. So really, you're already thinking about Square, because Square Restaurant Tech helps more than 400,000 restaurants do all those things and more. So when you're thinking about your restaurant, think bigger and think Square. Go to squareup.com/ca/en/campaign/big INRST to see why Square is big in restaurants.
I used it last night. I was like, hey,
boy,
there's Square.
Cam Robinson is the content director for Elite Prospects. He's joining us Tuesdays this year. And Cam, the big news yesterday from Darren Dreger that Dakota Joshua, Thatcher Demko, it looks like they're going to have to play most of, if not the entirety of the month of October without those two fellas. How do you think they'll maintain? And what are you hearing on those two guys?
So it sounds like I heard that 3 to 4 weeks there for both. Joshua, I think is probably, that's a fair timeline. He's skating. I think, it's obviously it's been a difficult couple months, as Alvin said in his press conference yesterday for Joshua, but he's coming along and he's skating. And but with Demko, I did do some poking around, and everybody's kind of they're guessing a little bit here still. But I did have a couple people tell me that 3 to 4 weeks might be optimistic for Thatcher, that there's a world where it's 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe we don't see him until December. Alvin is saying all the right things, that he's very confident in Silovs, and he's a big game goaltender, and he's proven that. And Lankinen's come in and he's pushed them, and he's been, a good person in that room for them. So they feel okay running those two out there. But I mean, for Canucks fans, is that this is a playoff team, and they should be able to survive without Demko, even if it is until December. But you certainly want him ready to go and rolling in the new year and pushing down the stretch, right?
Well, it sounds like this is an injury too, where it's gonna improve slowly, and there's going to be a point where you could theoretically play on it and probably not cause any further damage, but you might not be entirely comfortable. And that's where, if Lankinen and Silovs are doing their job, maybe you keep kicking the can down the road and just trying to get him even more comfortable and postponing any sort of return. So, how much does the performance of Silovs and Lankinen, affect ultimately the return of Demko? I would guess, based on what we're hearing about this injury, that they are woven together just a little bit, because it doesn't sound like there's a cure for this injury anyway.
Exactly, right. It's going to be one of these things that if the team is doing well and they're not really struggling, they probably won't push him to come back sooner than he's really feeling comfortable to. But like you said, it's just such a unique situation where it's like there's no surgery, there's no real rehab for it at this point. It's that he just needs to get used to dealing with it as it is and pushing through. And so for some people to hear that, they might think like, oh, well, players play through pain all the time, just go out there and play. But when it's your starting netminder and you want him to be good in April and May and maybe June, if you're lucky, is that, yeah, absolutely right. If the team is playing well, the goaltenders, even if it's a platoon situation, if you're riding the hot hand and then you slip on the other and it's going well, then why not just keep, and even when Demko's healthy, keeping all three on the roster isn't the end of the world, right?
They're making it work now.
Yeah. Cam, Aatu Räty has made the team. Your thoughts on this left field bid that makes good, at least for opening night?
I love it. And I will eat crow that I said, you guys asked me a few weeks ago that, of these young guys who legitimately has a chance. And I said at the time that I think Lekiramäki, just because of his unique skill set, that he would be the front runner for that regard. But, being so young and so inexperienced in North American pro hockey, that it makes a lot of sense to put him down. Where Räty, he has just kicked the door down and he kept stomping on it on the way. And he's managed to lock himself up an opening night bid on the roster here. So I think it's great for him. I think it speaks to his competitive nature and how he improved the foot speed over the summer. And like we talked about last week too, he's still young. There's still a lot of offensive upside that he could grow into. Alvin in that press conference though yesterday, he was pretty clear though that that rosters for set today or Monday there, and then we'll see how things go, right? As Joshua comes back in, as Pooh Suter's healthy, They're going to be working that cap situation like crazy, right? Trying to stay out of LTIR and accrue as much space as they can. So, will he be going down on off days? Like it's probably going to be a lot of up and downs for him this year if he does manage to stay. But I mean, it's great to see it. And I think for Canucks fans to have a young guy, a 21-year-old who can, viably step in as a third line center with that upside it's really great for a team that's in their competitive window.
Let me just say this, buddy. First of all, good on you for owning it. The more of these hits you do weekly, and certainly when you are in a daily format, as Blake and I have been for nearly 13 years now,
a lot of takes get ripe.
Crow becomes a staple of your diet. You eat as much crow as you eat chicken or beef. Mm-hmm. Hoglander.
Can't always be right.
Hoglander, the 3-year, $3 million extension. What were your thoughts there?
I like it. It's a player friendly deal in the sense that you're betting on the player and he's not so much betting on himself. I think that, 24 goals last year, obviously, the shooting percentage was through the moon, especially at 5-on-5, which is basically all he played, is that you're betting that he takes another step forward, which I think is a fair bet. He's taken several steps in just the last year or so. And so I don't expect him to shoot 20+% again, but I think that can be mitigated by upping his volume, right? And becoming that, that kind of torpedo again that we saw when he first stepped into the league and when he was in the SHL for Rogla too. He can be a menace on the forecheck. But if he went out and scored 20, 25 goals this year, like what's his arbitration case going to look like, right? Like he would have had himself a really strong case to make even more money on a shorter term deal. Now, this one is especially team friend or player friendly because he can also just walk to free agency at 27, right? So for him, it's money in the bank. He's got $9 million, and then maybe he does really, really well, and he'll get a big contract next, or he walks himself to free agency and he can pick a spot. So really great for him. But I also think it just kind of proves the trust and the belief that the organization has in him, that they think that they're going to get at least that much value over the next 3 years. And if he does it, if he proves it, then they'll take care of him, right? Just like Alvin said about Besser, go out and do it again, and we'll take care of you. And I'm sure the same was said to Hoglander too.
I'm betting Garland plays in the opener, but there is the potential where with no Joshua, no Suter, no Garland, that this is maybe as good an opportunity as Hoglander gets to get some elevated minutes and power play minutes and all that sort of stuff. It's on a platter for him to have a good start to the season and prove that the 24 is not a fluke, that the shooting percentage is not a fluke. And the way you can obviously mitigate the shooting percentage going down is by shot volume. And if you're out there in more offensive opportunities, he can boost that shot volume.
Exactly, right? Like he should be a power play player too, right? Like he has the type of skills that he's always been a power play player coming up as well. Like he works well in the net front, he worked well in the bumper spot, especially in the SHL. And so, yeah, getting those early reps and to see if he can get himself off to a hot start too with that contract in his back pocket could really, add to that confidence level. He could have another breakout season, and he doesn't need to shoot 20% to do it. And it's still very possible, especially if he can kick off one of those Heinen or Sprong on one of those top 6 wings. If he can get himself next to Pettersson at 5-on-5 too, that'll be really beneficial, especially if he can see himself a minute and a half of power play time too.
Okay, so we do have to ask you this. Brnnstrm got some lip service from the GM yesterday. Sort of talked about what we have seen in Erik Brännström in years gone by. I don't know that we've seen a July 1st signee get traded in the preseason without ever donning the jersey of the new team. Did you hear anything about his training camp in preseason? I mean, I got people in my mentions talking about how bad it was, but it can only be so bad. It's preseason. What do you think Erik Brannstrom's got left? He's 25. I mean, he's not like he's journeyman status just yet, is he?
He's not ancient, he's not decrepit, but it has been a tough go. And I'll say, since we're serving up Crow, I loved him as a draft eligible. I thought he was going to be a hell of a player. I wanted Vancouver to draft him. Like I was like, this kid's going to be a player. He moves the puck so well, skates well, great offensive instincts, and it just hasn't come together. And I mean, Ottawa believed it too, right? Like that was a big part of the Mark Stone trade. They thought that they were getting themselves a serious player. Like that year, Vegas, they went Suzuki, Glass, and Brnnstrm in that first round. We're like, wow, the Golden Knights are off to a red hot start. And only one of them worked out, and they're not in Vegas. So none of their first round picks are, I guess, either. But I mean, at this point, he's an interesting player still because he still can move the puck, right? He got 20 points in the NHL last year, the year before. He hangs around that level. He can move the puck with his feet. He can move the puck with the pass. He can be a second power play option, but he's one of these guys that, where does he fit on this club other than depth, right? Is if there's an injury on the left side, yeah, he can come up and he can move the puck and he can play some sheltered minutes and it'll be fine. But I just don't see him really, unless he takes some significant strides, really pushing to be a full-time regular in this organization. So I'm sure they would much rather have a guy that they can lock down an 8th spot, right? And then just be that heavy, hard guy as a 7-8.
What do you think evaluators got wrong with Brnnstrm at the draft, Cam? Like what didn't fire with Brnnstrm that people thought would?
So 2 things is that when these offensive guys are coming up, you are betting that they're going to round out the rest of their game, that through coaching, maturity, experience, is that they are going to become at least average at defense and switching in coverage and all those types of things. And then you're also betting that their offensive skills continue to develop and that they, a player who looks like he might have elite offensive skills is that it will continue to trend in that direction and he'll have elite offensive skills in the NHL level. And for Brnnstrm, neither of those things happen. So he has good offensive skills, which were great when he was a 17, 18-year-old, and they just haven't really expanded on that. And then the defensive side of things, the maturity in his defensive game and in his awareness off puck didn't really come as well. It took a really long time for him to get to be a point where he could even play like regular NHL minutes without being super sheltered. And then it didn't really, that bubble just kind of burst.
If they determine the Forbort and Desharnais are just not moving their feet well enough back there as a third pair, if that indeed is the third pair on the regular, are Juleson and Friedman enough of an upgrade in foot speed that fits the bill, though? Or is Brnnstrm the answer there if they want to get a little bit more fleet of foot and have a better first pass?
Better first pass. Yeah. Brnnstrm for sure. Better first pass. But I honestly, I don't love all that you mix and match those 4 any way you want. I don't love it.
Yeah.
Or 5, however you want to look at it. Like none of them is what I would want to be wheeling out there as a regular third pair. So I think staying out of LTIR, moving that Pullman contract and recruiting that cap space is got to be designed to get a right shot defenseman. And we'll talk about it every week. I think they need another one. I think they need a second pair level one that they can push everybody down the lineup. And then because the depth on the farm is great. They've got loads of, especially on the left side, loads of defensemen that they can pull up, but I just don't see any of them being enough to move the needle. And you really need somebody on that right side.
Yep. And that is something we will track over the course of this season, and we'll track it on Tuesdays with you, Cam Robinson. Enjoy that crow. It turns to turkey though later in the week, right? We're gobble turkey week. So we'll have a feast for you come next Tuesday.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, boys.